Hello everyone, my name is Angus. I'm a thinking skills teacher here at Cortex Academy. Today I'll be going through heads and legs questions, which is a question type that falls under the numerical reasoning section. The question classically gives you two types of animals and a certain amount of legs between them, and it's up to you to figure out how many animals of each type there are based on that. Alright, so this question looks very complicated and many students will resort to needless algebra or guess and check, but it can actually be done in just 4 simple steps. Alright, let's get into this question. So it says last year there were 120 animals and a quarter of them died due to a drought. So we first work out how many animals there are left by just doing 3/4 times 120, which is equal to 90 animals left in total. Now we can actually move on to our framework. So step number 1 is we assume everything is one option, right? So let's just assume everything is a cow, which has 4 legs, obviously. So if we just do 90 times 4, that gives us 360 legs in total. Now, obviously, this isn't how many legs there are in the actual question, right? The actual question tells us that there's 214 legs, which moves us to our second step, which is going to be find the difference with our actual total. So 360 minus 214, that is going to give us 146. So we have 146 legs as a difference between our assumption and our actual amount. And now we can move on to our third step, which is find the difference between our 2 options. Now our 2 options here are either a chicken or a cow, right? So that's just going to be 4 legs and 2 legs, and the difference between that is just going to be 2, right? Now we can move on to our last step, which is divide our total difference by the difference of our 2 options, right? Now, our difference between our 2 options is 2. How many times can we fit that into 146? That's just simple division. It's just going to be 73, right? So this basically tells us that we have to replace 73 cows with 73 chickens in order to get from our assumption to our total amount, which means there's going to be 73 chickens and 17 cows in total. So our answer for this question would be C, 17 cows. All right, let's take a look at this second question here, where it's a bit different because instead of looking at literal heads and legs, now we're kind of looking at it a bit metaphorically with money. So before we begin with our actual framework, we need to first find out how much money he won in total, because it says he gave half his prize to his brother and then half of the remaining to his sister. So we know that he saved 1/4 so far, and if 1/4 is equal to $90, to find our total prize, we just have to do 90 times 4, which is equal to 360. So $360 is the actual amount we won from our game show. Now we can move into our framework. So the game show is called 40 questions. So obviously there's 40 questions, right? And if we assume everything is one option, let's assume he got all of them correct. That means he got 40 questions correct times 15, which is going to give us $600 in total. Now, we know he didn't actually win $600. He won 360, right? So our second step is to find our difference with the actual total. So $600 minus 360, that's just going to give us $240. Now, we need to find the difference between our 2 options. So our 2 options here is either getting it correct, which is plus $15, or getting it incorrect, which is minus 5. Now, a lot of students here will make a mistake with negative numbers, and they might say the difference is just 10, but we need to remember, we need to treat it as a negative number, right? So if we have our brackets here as 15 minus brackets negative 5, that makes our difference between these 2 numbers $20 rather than 10, right? So keeping that in mind, now we can move on to step 4, which is just dividing our total difference by the difference between our 2 options, because that represents replacing all of our correct questions with incorrect questions until we get to our actual total. So let's do that. 240 divided by 20, that's just going to be equal to 12, which means that you have to replace 12 correct questions with 12 incorrect questions in order to get to our actual total, which means he got 12 incorrect and 28 correct, making our answer option D, 12 wrong questions.